Doctors, what's the strangest reaction you've had from a patient after telling them they don't have long left? Story 1. Nurse, but a patient was suffering from chronic liver failure and was due to have a medically assisted unaliving order with a physician. The man was in chronic pain most of his life, but just before he was due to go out, a snowstorm hit, and the physician couldn't fly to town to get to him. So they delayed his unaliving for 2 weeks, and boy was he ticked. You see, to be mentally prepared to perish is one thing. To have it delayed must be emotionally and physically painful, because now you have to live with doubt or anger. In these 2 weeks, he made a friend in the same unit. She didn't know he was due to unalive until the last day. She cried, saying she didn't understand why he didn't want to say goodbye to her. He decided to leave his belongings with her, as it was easier to do that than to say goodbye. So as he was rolling past the unit to perish, you could hear the sobbing of a frail, broken woman. She admitted to considering doing the same thing from her own chronic illness, but was glad she didn't pull through. I imagine the man perished with more than he thought he could carry. He came in with nothing and left with a friendship, but he wanted to perish. He simply could not live in pain anymore. I don't know about you, but it's difficult to figure out what to think in this kind of situation, especially if you've never had anywhere close to this kind of situation in your life before. To be so mentally prepared to go away and then have it delayed, of course that's going to stir a lot of feelings, the least of which is total frustration. You think you're near the finish line, only to find that the finish line has been extended, and you have to suffer through the pain. That's a pretty tragic story to start off this list with. Story 2. EMT here. I went to a patient who was at the end of his life. He knew he was, had end-of-life care instructions and a DNR. We were called as he was vomiting and having abnormal pain. We got there and gave him pain relief and just sat with him for a bit. It was clear he was on his way out and probably wouldn't live through the night, and he knew it. He asked us if he was going to perish, and we didn't outright tell him, but we said his vital signs were starting to decline and he wasn't looking too good, etc. When we said this, he kind of just went, okay then, and sat there in silence with his eyes closed and almost like a little smile on his face. I have no idea what he was thinking, but he almost seemed relieved, like glad that it was all coming to an end. From what I know of him, he'd been virtually bedbound with pretty much 24/7 care for the last few months. His wife had perished about a year earlier, and his family lived away. I like to think that in the last few hours he found some relief in the fact that his pain would soon be over and that he wouldn't have to suffer alone anymore. See, this is where you just still don't know what to think. The only thing I can imagine is this person felt relief that whatever pain he was going through was going to end. Do you think maybe he only felt relief when he fell asleep? I think the fact that he was just going to go to sleep and just have a nice long rest probably gave him something to look forward to in an unusual sort of way. I'm glad he found some peace. Story 3. Completely calm and accepting. It happens, but every single patient encounter until then had understandably involved shock and bursting into tears. This man was calm, cool, and collected. He was very polite and thanked me for my time. Turns out his daughter is a radiologist at the hospital we sent the biopsy sample to, and she had accessed his patient files to inform him of the news as soon as it came through, 2 days earlier. So I had told him nothing new, and he had just politely sat through my talk before we could start discussing referrals. I don't know how I felt about the encounter. Putting your child in a position where they have to be the one to tell their parent they have 6 months left to live is rough, and there are medical legal issues. But waiting to hear biopsy news is also rough. I don't know his daughter or their relationship, so I put it away in the back of my mind and didn't take it out again. That is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have someone that can help you get news sooner. If the news turned out that he was going to live, the issues of the daughter letting him know earlier might not be as tangled as they are in this situation. It's gotta be hard when you find out the truth and then have to tell a relative that they don't have that long left. That's gotta be some pressure on the job that you don't really need to be able to do it effectively. I think usually you don't even have any emotions involved in doing that kind of stuff, or you find yourself breaking down over every bad result you come across. Story 4. Not a doctor, but I sat in the room with my mom when the oncologist said the chemo wasn't working and the mets spread. Did she want to try something else? Nope, she was done. Doc said 3 to 9 months. That was November 2017. She passed March 2018. She was calm, pleased with her decision, sense of relaxation that those years of chemo, hydration, blood work, office visits were over, as that had become her life. She finally gave zero cares. We went out to eat for lunch that week, and her skin was neon highlighter yellow. This woman never left the house without head-to-toe Ralph Lauren and perfect hair. Opted for home hospice and all those comfy meds involved. Not sure if that's strange or not, but finding peace in ending life isn't normal to most of us. Story 5. I'm not a doctor, but my friend is. He told me a story of an older patient he was treating with cancer, and he was giving him the treatments available to him to prolong his life and give him a little bit longer with his family and friends. The guy responded back with something like this. Son, I've lived on this earth for 76 years. I've seen my kids grow up to be amazing, and they've given me grandchildren to enjoy. I don't want to start a treatment that takes away my ability to enjoy them. I damn sure don't want to start treatments that make a steak taste like metal. I've had many years here, and when my time comes, it will come. Thank you for your help. Story 6. Not a doctor, but when my grandma was 89, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was operable, and physically she was perfectly fine. The downside of the operation was that, given her age, doctors couldn't tell if she would have been still herself after the surgery. She refused surgery. She said, "All of my friends have died. My husband has died. All I've got now are my memories. I don't want to lose them, too." She died 4 weeks later in her sleep. It's been hard for us because the tumor took her lucidity away, so she wasn't even able to recognize us in her final days. But I totally understood her reasons, and if I'll ever be in that situation, I think I'd do the same. That's a tough call to make. Gradually lose your ability to recognize anything for a short period, or live longer but have certain memories be cut out or locked away. You'd live longer, but maybe you wouldn't remember your son. Maybe you wouldn't remember your grandchildren. That shows that she wasn't just thinking of herself. She was thinking of the others in her life and how it would affect them. When you're facing your own mortality, that's a very selfless attitude to have. Story 7. Was a hospital chaplain. Had to stop because it beat me down, and my heart broke over every one of those people. Still, to answer your question, most cried and were visibly afraid. But one guy who was my age at the time, fairly young, was perishing from alcoholism-related issues, and I was around shortly after he got the news that he wouldn't live as soon as they took him off the dialysis. He said, "Don't feel sorry for me. I did this to myself. I'm just worried about how my mom is going to handle it. But really, I'm fine with it. I know I went too far, and this is what happens." Story 8. My dad is a doctor. I asked him a few times if anyone has ever unalived his most memorable patient and what made it worth it. He said the most memorable patient was a young girl he had, 16 years old, who was perishing. When he spoke to her about what was happening, she simply asked if someone could bring her the book in her bag and keep her mom out of the room while she read because those people exhaust me. She finished the book, and a week later passed away. Story 9. Not a doctor here, but have a rather strange response. 3 years ago, my grandma was diagnosed with congestive heart failure and was given a few months to live. The whole family was still in a fragile state as we had just lost my grandpa less than a month before. The doctor was very kind and did his best to let the news down as gently as he could to her. When he asked her about how she felt about it, she looked him dead in the eyes and went, "Well, to be honest, rather bored." She passed exactly a year after my grandpa on the same day. I wonder if she knew she didn't have long after her husband went. We hear a lot of stories about how one partner will pass, and then the other will pass shortly after that, even though they seem perfectly healthy. Being committed to someone for so long probably has something to do with it. You've been with them for so long that you just couldn't imagine living without them, so you basically don't. Maybe she knew and she was just kind of already accepting of it long before she was diagnosed. Story 10. Not a doctor, but an apprentice in college. My boss told me to go with him when she delivers the notice because I will need to do it one day. Dude was silent as a rock. I was the last one to leave the room. He called me and said, "Finally, I'm going to Valhalla to see my grandma." I said, "Yes, bro, your grandma is waiting for you." Never saw a most sincere smile in my life. He didn't have anyone left. I was the last person that talked to him and was the first person he talked to that was kind to him. He passed away the next day. I cried when I heard the news. Story 11. My grandfather was totally okay with it. He'd become a shell of his former self when Nana passed away and was just waiting for God the rest of his life. When he found out he had inoperable lung cancer, he just took it all philosophically. He was ready to go. When they buried him, my mom put it best. There you go. You're back with her. You got what you wanted. They'd been married almost 60 years. She passed a week before their 60th wedding anniversary. I can only imagine the pain he must have gone through. Story 12. Most were heartbreaking and involved a lot of tears on both sides. On the brighter side, I once had a patient in her 80s with a fairly prominent chest tattoo which had remarkably sharp definition and a modern flair. She informed me that she always wanted a tattoo, and she'd reached the point in her life that she did what made her happy, so she had it done that year. She was a damn cool grandma. I don't think it's unheard of for someone that age to have a tattoo, but that must have been an experience for her at that age to get a tattoo. I wonder what the tattoo was of. It sounds like she probably thought about doing this quite a while before, but just couldn't do it because of some reason or another. I wonder if some of her family even protested even when she said she was going to get it, whether they liked it or not. But good on her for doing what she wanted to do. Story 13. When my great aunt was passing in June, they told her they could give her some treatments to give her another 6 months or so, and she basically said, "No thanks, just pain meds for me." They told her she'd only make it another 2, maybe 3 weeks on pain meds. She told them that's not her problem anymore. I think she passed 2 weeks after being put in hospice. The nurses all told us that she was so sweet. They couldn't believe how ready she was to pass. Story 14. Not a doctor, but when I was in pharmacy school, I did a rotation at a cancer ward. Had a few people pass on while I was there. One was a 90-something-year-old man who had some sort of brain cancer. The doctor told him he had about a week to live. The next day, we were doing our rounds, and he was in his room singing, "I'm about to die, I'm about to die," over and over, and laughing about it. I can see his side. It's going to happen to him. You might as well accept it, even have a laugh about it. From someone else looking into his room, I'd be creeped out. Again, I get it. He's accepting his fate and even sort of laughing in the face of the Grim Reaper. But man, to hear someone singing about how they are going to go away. Story 15. My mom told me that when she had staph infection in her knee really bad when I was just a kid, her doctors told her to make plans for her passing just in case. My mom just busted out crying for about 15 seconds before she just turned into the most cheerful woman. Needless to say, it spooked my dad, her nurses, and her doctors. Story 16. Somewhere out there is a 90-year-old woman who, when told she had terminal cancer, decided that she wanted to spend the rest of her life traveling with her dog. If she's still out there, I hope she's happy. Story 17. I am a doctor, and the strangest reaction I've had was, "Are you sure? Okay then." To be fair, I think he was already a little numb. His wife had passed from cancer about 2 weeks ago, and then I had to tell him he had lung cancer. It sounds like this guy just went through all the big emotions already. Emotionally, he was probably already exhausted. There was probably no other way for him to react. I wonder if he had a stronger reaction later. Story 18. Read up on the story of magician David Blaine and how his mother passed away in his arms when he was a kid. This effect was so profound that it forged the David Blaine we know today, who was truly an incredible person. Story 19. One time I told a mother her child wouldn't live for very long, and she freaked. She sweared and stormed out of the room. I think she's never entered the hospital again. Story 20. My mom's godmother reportedly looked at the doctor when he told her she had stage 4 lung cancer and said, "Well, I'm 94. It was bound to be something." I wonder if there was relief in that voice. You're at 94. You're expecting that you're not going to be long for this earth. I agree with the sentiment. It's got to be something. You almost feel like saying, "Well, finally." Story 21. The hell do you know? You ain't God. He was given 6 months. That was 5 years ago. He still has inoperable cancer, but he's in remission. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.